As version 1 of Zenless Zone Zero wraps up, we're now sitting at 22 S-rank agents and 11 A-rank ones. It's been a full year of experimenting, building teams, figuring out what works where, and slowly understanding what type of gameplay I enjoy the most. And looking back, I think it's safe to say that anomaly agents have stood out the most to me, both in terms of gameplay and character design. So, to mark the end of version 1, I thought it'd be fun to go over each and every agent and share my impressions of them. Not just in terms of how they perform mechanically, but also how they landed for me in terms of playstyle, story presence, and general vibes after spending time with them throughout the year. I haven't had the time or resources to fully build every single agent, but I've played enough to have a good sense of what each agent is able to bring to the table. And I'll be using a tier list to help keep track of my thoughts along the way. If I say something you disagree with throughout this list, or if you think that I missed something about your favorite character, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. With that said, let's go through each agent faction by faction, starting from the top with the Cunning Hares. For being the face of the game and a completely free unit, I'm often surprised of how capable Anby is. Sure, she can't really compete with other S-rank agents, but her days output is surprisingly high. And because of that, she works in most squad setups, giving her a lot of chances to shine. I also really like her animations. Early on, she set some expectations for me about what an agent should be able to do, especially with her EX special that extends her basic combo, which I really like. Another thing I appreciate is her presence in the story. I like how she, along with the rest of the Cunning Hares, show up throughout all of version 1, rather than just being forgotten after the first chapter. Nicole is another agent that always surprises me with how relevant she still is. I never really got around to using her much after patch 1.1, but everything she brings to the table definitely makes her worth investing in. Being a support agent allows her to equip a lot of useful disc sets and engines, which are just great improvements to any squad. And the fact that she and Anby makes up the core of the free-to-play team is another bonus. The two of them, together with most other agents from version 1, make for a surprisingly solid squad. I feel like her role in the story can be a bit one-dimensional sometimes, since everything she does is so hyper-focused around making Denny's. But her heart is in the right place, and we see throughout the story, and especially in her trust events, that she does everything for a good reason. I really love Billy's character and his design and just how relevant he is throughout the story. The hints about his past are also fun, and it would be cool if we get an S-rank Billy at some point, since they've already opened up that door with Anby. Though his current version just doesn't really do it for me in terms of gameplay. That said, I feel like I can't say too many bad things about him. Especially after seeing what people are able to do with him in the tower and in Deadly Assault. There are some pretty legendary Billy runs out there. But for me personally, his gameplay is just kinda boring. He's great in the story though, and I'd love to see more of him and the rest of the Cunning Hares in the future. I have some fundamental problems with Nekomata's playstyle, where she gets a boost in damage when she's attacking enemies from behind, but her basic attacks more often than not lands you in front of an enemy, even when they're just stationary. That said, Nekomata was my second S-rank agent, so I got a lot of use out of her early on, and I did enjoy my time with her. My impression of her just got a bit worse now that I have better agents to compare Nekomata to, though she's definitely one of my favorite agents whenever she appears in animated cutscenes, since she kind of steals the show. The animator seems to have a great time with her, giving her those cat-like behaviors, and it really adds to her charm. And she's just a great addition to the rest of the Cunning Hares. I tried to make Anton work for me early on, especially after people discovered you could do some cancel tech with his animations and his drill attack to pull off some absolutely crazy damage numbers. I never got it to work myself though, so I kinda just gave up on him after that. And it doesn't help that I don't find his gameplay all that fun either. He's a pure attack unit with very little going on mechanically, and in a game with so many other strong DPS options, there's just no real reason to bring him over someone else. It's kind of the curse of being a starter A rank. Story-wise, he's fine. Nothing particularly bad, but nothing really that stands out either. He never gets a real moment to shine, since he's mostly just bro this, bro that, and then Koleda quickly takes over the spotlight during the Belobog arc. Honestly, I've never found a good reason to use Ben. He suffers from being a defense unit without bringing any significant utility. Compared to a support agent, he just doesn't offer enough. And in a game where you're usually better off dodging or using assists instead of tanking hits, defense units really need to bring some kind of extra value to be useful, and unfortunately, Ben just doesn't. That said, I really love him in the story. The contrast between his huge, intimidating looks and his actual role as the gentle accountant for Belobog Industry is always fun. It's a trope I really enjoy. His animated intro with the rest of the Belobog crew is also great. Oh, and I really like his unique combo attacks with Koleda. I kinda hope we get more of these in the future, even though I can see an issue with this mechanic. I didn't get Koleda until pretty late in version 1, so I don't have a ton of hands-on experience with her in squads. But from what I've seen, she does do a lot of daze damage in bursts with her EX attacks. Beyond that though, she doesn't really offer much else. She's kind of like an S-rank version of Anby, so she is very effective at stunning enemies, which makes her a solid pick for squads that can make use of her well. In terms of story, I really like how she's portrayed as extremely capable, even though she's the very young boss of the Belobog crew. She keeps things interesting as the main driver for the Belobog arc, and honestly I couldn't help but get hyped at the end of her story when she pilots her dad's machine to take out the sacrificed ethereal. Gameplay wise, Grace just doesn't do much for me. Her playstyle is really simple, and while that makes her easy to pick up, it also means that she's not the most exciting agent to actually play. Having said that, she applies the electric anomaly incredibly quickly, which depending on squad setup can be super useful. She fits well as a secondary anomaly agent in a squad, but she can just as easily take on the role of a main DPS if needed. Honestly, I'd say she's probably the best offensive non-exclusive S-rank in the game. Throughout her story missions, she can feel pretty one-note since she's so hyper-focused on her machines, but she still has her moments. I especially like when she shows a more caring, sisterly side when it comes to Koleda. It gives her a bit of extra depth, which I appreciate. Lycaon was my first S-rank agent, and he's seen a ton of use throughout version 1 thanks to his solid daze output, his ice resistance shred, and his stun damage multiplier. Honestly, it kind of feels like he's got a bit too much going on in his kit compared to other non-exclusive S-ranks. Like, he could have handed that stun damage multiplier over to Koleda and still been a great unit, and doing so would have helped her become a bit better as well. But hey, we got him as this, and he's great. His gameplay is simple with a nice weighty feel to his attacks, and in the story he's a lot of fun whenever he shows up. I like the contrast between his overly proper attitude and then the softer side we see, especially when his past cringe era gets brought up. Overall, he's just a great agent, and in my opinion, probably the best agent a new player can start out with. Rina has her own kind of squad setup that revolves around stacking as much pen as possible since she amplifies it so much. That gives her a pretty solid place in the game, especially in mono electric teams since she also boosts both general electric damage and the shock attribute anomaly. But I've always found her gameplay to be a bit clunky, and keeping her buffs active requires a lot of maintenance. She's still a very strong agent that brings a lot of value to any team that's built to take advantage of her bonuses. She's just not the easiest to use effectively. In the story, she doesn't have much of a presence and mainly just feels like a float around to Lycaon without much to do, unfortunately. Corin is in a similar spot to both Billy and Anton. Being a starter A-rank attack unit means she's fighting for the most important role in a team, being the main damage dealer. Her playstyle is slow but very focused. Most of the time when playing her, you're just walking towards enemies, very menacingly. But to her credit, she has a very clear identity. She wants to be on field to do damage when an enemy is stunned, and everything she does just builds towards this. That said, I've seen people clear deadly assault bosses with Corin as the main damage dealer, so with the right build and enough investment, she can definitely perform. Personally though, she's never really clicked for me. I did enjoy her appearances in the animated story scenes though, but that might be more because of Nekomata or whoever else appears with her at the time. She's not my favorite agent, but I can respect what she's able to do. Ellen. I wish I had more chances to use her, but she's kind of just been pushed out of the spotlight over time. Still, I had a blast with her back in patch 1.0, dashing around the battlefield, slamming into enemies, dishing out big damage numbers. To me, her playstyle is just a lot of fun. She really carried the early parts of my Zenless Zone Zero experience, especially on my Mono Frost team. Story-wise, her appearances have been okay, but nothing really that stood out to me. I wasn't a huge fan of how much they lean into the whole constantly falling asleep thing. Thankfully, her personal story added a lot more depth to her. And yes, I am very happy that she's getting some well-deserved changes in version 2. I feel like Zhu Yuan has fallen off a bit harder than other S-rank agents so far. There are just a lot more interesting and flexible options available now. And I hate to make this comparison, but she really does feel like an S-rank version of Corin in some ways, just being dialed up to 11. Zhu Yuan doesn't bring much to a squad outside of stun windows, but man, when it's her time to shine, it does feel great. It takes almost no effort to deal crazy amounts of damage during a stun window, which is definitely a nice bonus. Story-wise though, I really like Zhu Yuan. She's proactive and drives things forward whenever she's on screen, and I love the contrast between her all-business attitude and the softer side she shows around Bella and Wise. She's a great presence in the story, even if I don't use her too much in actual squads anymore. Qingyi is an interesting agent to me because she's an on-field stunner. Her kit needs some time to build up before all the really important parts come online. But when she's ready, she makes units like Corin and Zhu Yuan work really well. That said, for the same reasons, she can be a bit tricky to slot into teams sometimes. Any attack unit that wants to capitalize on stuns and be on field for extended periods of time will clash with Qingyi's high field time needs. In the story, they keep things very vague about her past, which is interesting to me. I just hope it eventually leads somewhere and doesn't end up as a bunch of loose threads with no payoff. I know I talked down on Ben for being a defense unit, but Seth actually brings something valuable to the table. I've used him a lot in my anomaly teams thanks to the increased survivability and boost to anomaly proficiency that he brings. Though a negative thing about him is that his attack animations are still really long, especially his chain attack and ultimate, so they're usually not worth using. He's still a solid shielder and buffer though, so it actually feels valid to bring him into squads where he's able to do something meaningful. Seth got a lot of screen time when he was first introduced, which helped us get to know him a bit better. He's kind of a one-dimensional goody two-shoes though, but I did appreciate how he helps bring more agency into the story with Jane. I love playing Jane. I even go out of my way sometimes to find excuses to bring her into the squad. I remember being on the fence about getting her early in the game, but I'm so glad I did. Her gameplay is just incredibly smooth and her physical anomaly feels amazing to trigger. And the fact that she works well with pretty much every other anomaly agent is another big bonus. I also really like her femme fatale vibe and sultry voice. It works great with how genuinely powerful and competent she is in her role in the story. And her part of the story kind of marked a turning point, where we started to move away from the TV screen gameplay. I really enjoyed walking around the world with the agents during her arc. It made things feel a bit more alive. That said, I do hope they bring back the TV screens in some way, because losing that unique storytelling mechanic would be a shame. I feel like it's hard to criticize any of the support agents in this game. They're all really solid. And Lucy kind of sets the standard for what a support DPS hybrid should be. I'm always surprised to see how much she contributes to a team's overall damage. She's super easy to slot into most squads, both because of the buffs she brings and how straightforward she is to play. She's a great investment for anyone who has her. In the story, I really enjoy her role within the Sons of Caledon. She plays the straight man to Caesar's chaos, and their dynamic is always fun to watch. Piper is honestly kind of a powerhouse for being the only A-rank anomaly agent we have. It doesn't even stop her from pumping out an insane amount of damage through her assault procs. She fills a role pretty similar to Jane's, just with fewer offensive and defensive tools, but honestly it doesn't really matter since assault can be such a strong disorder trigger for anomaly teams. She felt a little limited in terms of squad options at the start of the game, but with every new anomaly agent we get, her squad options just keeps improving. I wouldn't be surprised if you could clear all content with Piper as your main damage dealer. Early on, I didn't really like Piper. We had her in the roster for quite a while before she actually showed up in the story, which felt odd. But after finally getting to know her and seeing more of that old-timey persona, I've definitely grown to appreciate her more. Caesar is still one of my favorite agents. I love her over-the-top animations, her gameplay style, and just all the bonuses she brings to a squad, while basically being a stun unit disguised as a defense unit. She also fills a support role through her shields and damage boost, making her feel like the complete defensive package. I feel like Ben is catching a lot of unnecessary heat here, but I think Caesar shows how the dev learned from him. Between her and Seth, they really figured out how to make defense units feel impactful. If anything, I worry they might have gone a bit too far with Caesar. And now it might be tough to design a new defense agent that doesn't feel like a step down, but we'll see. As for the story, I adore Caesar. She's like the ultimate shonen protagonist, always aiming for the top but with a heart of gold. The ending of the Sons of Caledon arc had a similar kind of hype to the Belobog arc. Maybe a bit cheesy and predictable, sure, but it totally works on me every time. Burnice holds a special place in my heart as the agent where I decided to try and make my first guide. Compared to other agents released before her, I really appreciated how different she felt. The fact that she can output so much anomaly and damage without needing to hog field time just felt new and kind of different. Also, her having a presence in a squad even when leaving space for another agent to shine is another thing I really like about her. She also continues to pair incredibly well with Jane. Physical and fire anomaly just work so well together. I do find that she can struggle a bit with energy sometimes when trying to maintain her passive damage, though honestly it might just be a skill issue on my end. Not that it matters too much with how much damage she outputs. She's also a fun addition to the Sons of Caledon, acting as the complete opposite of Lucy's personality. Oh, and of course her Burning Desire music video. Mocktails, mixers, ice. The snacks are real nice. Lighter is incredibly strong. He buffs both ice and fire units, extends stun timers, and gives himself an impressive self buff that lets him pump out even more days. He's very flexible on field and has a smooth, easy setup for getting his full kit online. Keeping his buffs active doesn't take much effort either, which makes him feel rewarding to use right from the start. That said, I remember feeling like he was overshadowed at launch. There just weren't enough compatible agents at the time to really make the most out of his kit. Thankfully, later patches gave him the revenge arc he deserved, and he rose up to become one of the best stun agents in the game. What I do wish though is that his backstory was better integrated into the main content. A lot of his characterization is tucked away in his pre-release video and trust events, which not everyone will experience. He's a compelling character, but he didn't get the stage time he deserved. His release timing didn't help either, landing just before Miyabi's, which probably didn't do his popularity any favors. I feel a bit bad about Pulchra, because I don't have a whole lot to say about her. I used her briefly when she was given out for free during patch 1.6, which was nice. But with so many other agents available, I just never found a reason to keep her in my squads. That said, I did enjoy learning about the aftershock mechanics that was introduced with her release. Since then, I've seen plenty of low-cost or free-to-play clears of endgame content where Pulchra holds her own in terms of days and damage output. She's very efficient and easy to use. What holds her back in my opinion is how reliant she is on reaching M6 to be a viable stun agent outside of aftershock focused teams. That makes her feel a bit too gated for more general use. Story-wise, I really like Burnice's attempts to get Pulchra to warm up to her. Their dynamic reminds me a lot of Caesar and Lucy. One warm and outgoing and the other one more reserved. It's a nice contrast that adds some more charm to both characters. Soukaku is one of those agents I've seen used in some really wild clears early on, even sometimes as the main DPS. She may not be as popular now, likely due to the rise of a certain other support agent, but she's still a fantastic unit that brings a lot of utility. Her buffs are strong, her debuffs are impactful, and she contributes a good amount of anomaly buildup as well. That said, she does demand a decent chunk of field time to get the most out of her kit. And her attack buff in particular requires some good gear investment to really shine. Still, if you put in the effort into her, she's absolutely worth it. In the story, unfortunately, Soukaku barely gets any spotlight. She mostly serves as a supporting detail in Yanagi's backstory about the Oni. I really hope we get more info about the Oni in future content. It's an interesting story beat I'd like to know more about, if for nothing else than for more world building. Yanagi is one of my favorite agents. I feel like she was the turning point for me when I really started to understand the game. And making her guide was honestly a lot of fun. Figuring out her different combos and how to optimize her stance shifts made me appreciate just how deep her kit really is. Then her polarity disorder effect is just icing on the cake. It's so satisfying every time it triggers. Oh, and her survivability is great too. Being able to block or dodge attacks mid-combo makes her have such a nice flow to her and be really rewarding to master. She's definitely one of the best agents of version 1 in my opinion, though that might just be my bias for anomaly agents showing. For her story presence, I'm really glad she got her own focus before Miyabi came in and took more of the spotlight. It gave her some well-deserved time to shine. Harumasa is interesting because most of the things I find are his pros could just as easily be his cons, depending on the player. He's one of the most technically demanding agents to play well. To do his combos we kind of need a better understanding of his whole kit, which I really appreciate. I kinda wish we got more units like this. That said, I don't particularly enjoy his gameplay. Like other attack units, he thrives when enemies are stunned, but he's not entirely reliant on stun windows as he can still output solid damage normally. So he definitely has a lot going for him, but still, something about his gameplay just doesn't click for me. I do like him in the story though. I have mixed feelings about Miyabi. I love her gameplay, it's low risk, high reward, and incredibly satisfying. But her sheer power just makes other agents feel a bit worse to play. She does too much, filling the role of a main DPS who's an anomaly agent while having all the qualities that makes attack agents strong. I get that Void Hunters are meant to be apex characters in the game, but the devs really need to be careful when balancing these because Miyabi effectively makes every other ice unit obsolete right now. Most Miyabi squads are also a bit weird because Miyabi is the team. Everyone else is just kinda along for the ride. Story-wise, Miyabi grew on me at the end of her story when she started showing more emotions, but for the most of it she just comes off as rather bland. She's not my favorite character in the narrative. Still, as a gameplay experience, she definitely is one of my favorites, especially together with Yanagi. I love the extremely satisfying combat flow these two have together. Astra is just too good. She fits into every team, and the only reason I don't paint her in the same negative light as I do with Miyabi is because she's just kind of there. You don't really notice her apart from your squad now just being a two-man team instead of a trio, but you definitely notice it when you don't bring her into the squad. She's the ultimate set and forget unit, and strangely I don't really mind that about her. Maybe Astra makes me a hypocrite, but hey, it's my list. I guess that's just how it is. I did really enjoy the Stars of Lyra story though. It felt somewhat disconnected from the previous arc, which makes sense since the last story ended just a patch before, but overall it was a fun side story. Here we go. Evelyn is my favorite version 1 agent. She gave me hope that we'd still get plenty of interesting agents even in a post-Miyabi world. Her animations are amazing, her gameplay is super fun, and her kit offers a lot of opportunity for skill expression. It was thanks to her that I learned the value of cancelling chain attacks just to squeeze out more controlled attacks within a single stun window. Evelyn doesn't necessarily bring anything completely new as an attack agent, but if she could be the benchmark for future attack units, I'd be very happy. In the Stars of Lyra story, Evelyn totally steals the spotlight from Astra in my opinion. They play off each other well and they're both important to the story, but Evelyn just ends up being the more interesting character. Soldier 11 feels like the original baseline for S-rank attack agents. She has mechanics, but they mostly revolve around brief pauses in her attacks, which can feel clunky or sometimes even just be ignored thanks to her other skills. Her damage output is decent, but nothing that stands out compared to other units who either bring more complexity or just simply outperform her. That said, in capable hands and with the right resources, she can output some big numbers. When I first got Soldier 11, I already had stronger attack agents, so I never really found a solid place for her in any squads. And then when Evelyn was released, she quickly took over any slot in any squad I would have put Soldier 11 in. I'm not really a fan of her story appearances either. Neither her personal story nor her role as the damsel in distress in Anby and Trigger's arc did much for me. And what they did with her character at the end also feels kind of off. Suddenly, she's just fawning over Phaethon for no real reason, which came across as pretty strange. I'm starting off with an extreme nitpick here, but getting Trigger fully ready with her sniper stance at the start of battle can feel a bit awkward. Once she's set up though, her gameplay is silky smooth and requires very little effort to maintain. She's definitely one of my favorite stun agents, thanks to her consistent daze output, solid damage, and damage buff. Sometimes, simple really is the best. Her story was decent, but the thing I enjoyed the most was the way Trigger was introduced. We first get to meet her together with Anby, with Phaethon hinting at their past connection. And then in the next patch, we get to see exactly how they met. In this case, this storytelling approach worked very well for me. I had my reservations about Soldier Zero at first, but I find myself wanting to use her more and more whenever I get the chance. Part of it might be because of how great she feels to play paired up with Trigger, but her own gameplay feels so smooth that it's definitely also a big factor. She works great by herself, but really shines as a driver for Aftershock teams. Though her unique character mechanic can be a bit frustrating sometimes when facing multiple enemies. Though thankfully that situation doesn't come up too often thanks to her high damage output. I'm glad we got some more insight into Anby's past through her story, and that her new kit fits her so well while still making a lot of sense. She's a fun addition to the roster that also opens up the door for other A-rank agents to get their own S-rank glow up in the future. Vivian fills a role very similar to Burnice, but with a slightly more active playstyle. I actually prefer how she plays over Burnice, and I love the unique animations the devs gave her. They really help highlight and express her elegant character in a way few other agents have gotten. Her damage output goes from solid to amazing, but it depends heavily on having another anomaly unit in the squad, because she doesn't really work as a solo anomaly agent unfortunately. But I've really enjoyed Vivian's addition both gameplay wise and in the final parts of the story. Partly because she's shown to be so capable, but also because she's a huge fan of us, the player, which adds some fun flavor to her character. Hugo walks a fine line between feeling extremely unsatisfying to play and wow, that burst damage feels amazing. Unfortunately though, to me he kind of embodies the main issues with a lot of attack agents and just amplifies them, which is being extremely reliant on stun windows. His kit also leans into the most frustrating part of physical anomaly agents, which is triggering a big burst of damage that still leaves the enemy on a sliver of HP. And unlike an anomaly agent who can build their own anomalies, Hugo depends a lot more on other agents to make his damage really count. And finally for his story, I didn't really like the twist at the end, and how he and Lycaon just kinda made up and became friends again. It felt cheap to me and could have worked out even if Hugo had gotten his revenge against his father. Now he just didn't get that revenge properly and just continued on with his life pretending he was evil, losing Lycaon as a friend for a long time, and blaming a lot of things on him as well. It just felt a bit off to me. Alright, so after 33 agents, here's my very objective and completely correct agent tier list for version 1. I don't think I have any too out there opinions, but please let me know what you think in the comments. This became a much bigger project than I had originally planned, but I'm really glad I saw it through. I wanted to get this video out before version 2 released, not just to wrap up this chapter, but also so that I can come back to this list someday in the future. I'm still a very tiny content creator in the grand scheme of things, but I wanted to take a moment here to say thank you to everyone who's ever watched any of my videos. Whether you're a quiet lurker, someone who leaves a like, or if you ever drop a comment, it means the world to me. Every bit of engagement is fuel that keeps me going, and whenever someone says thank you for the work I put in, it really makes it all worth it. I've learned a lot since I started out, and I know that there's still a lot more room to grow, but I'm excited to keep going, to keep improving, and to keep making content that I'm proud of. So as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.